This is where the majority of the people in New River. It's right next to the armory. That's where this big, huge population thing. And they're going to have to drive all the way out of the city limits over here to Bamboo Road to vote. This is just damn stupid.
This tape is from Watauga County in western North Carolina. Happened on Monday night this week. And what you see there on one level looks like a little local level dispute for a county in North Carolina. But it turns out that what happened there is also a sign of something really big going on in that state. And from a national perspective, what everybody can tell is going on in North Carolina is that there are these weekly protests going on, right? These protests by liberal groups, African-American groups, protesting, people getting arrested by the dozens, sometimes by the hundreds, week after week, trying to get national attention to what's going on in North Carolina. So from the national level, those weekly protests are easy to see. You can also, from the national level, see that there's something going on with the state's Republican governor. His approval rating has gone through the floor. It's the lowest it's been since he took office earlier this year. Pat McCrory is down to a 39% approval rating, which is like Paul LePage, Rick Scott territory. It's just terrible. Well, on Monday, the day of that meeting you just saw in Watauga County, this deeply unpopular governor, Pat McCrory, signed into law what's being described as the worst voter suppression bill in the country. Elections expert Rick Hasson, who you've seen on this show a bunch of times, he's a professor at University of California. He says, looking at that North Carolina bill that Pat McCrory just signed, he says it is the worst voter suppression bill signed into law in any state since 1965, when the Voting Rights Act passed. But what's becoming clear all of a sudden this week in North Carolina is that bill, that radical bill, that huge overhaul of North Carolina voting rights that Pat McCrory signed on Monday, that is not a standalone thing. It apparently is just part of an overall plan, a multi-part plan to radically change democracy in that state. A plan that includes more than just this new law that's already being put into effect. You can see it happening this week in these counties. This is Appalachian State University in North Carolina. Look.
Appalachian is hot, hot, hot. Come and let us show you what we've got. Come and let us show you what we're hot, hot, hot.
Obviously part of their promo video as Appalachian State. The very friendly, hot, hot, hot Appalachian State University is where you see it there in the sort of northwest corner of North Carolina. It's in Boone, Watauga County, North Carolina. Watauga County, as you can see here, went for Mitt Romney in the presidential election, but just barely. It was really close. The specific voter precincts in Boone, in and around Appalachian State, those precincts actually went for Barack Obama by a lot. Those precincts went for Barack Obama by such big margins that they almost dragged the rest of the county with them, but the county ultimately went for Romney by a hair. Now, of course, students at Appalachian State are about to find that from here on out, it's going to be a lot harder to vote in North Carolina. The new law signed by Governor McCrory this week is going to slash early voting in the state. They're also cutting same-day voter registration. And most importantly, you will be blocked from voting in the state unless you show a government-issued ID. Even if you go to a public university like Appalachian State University and your student ID is therefore provided to you by the state, your Appalachian State student ID will not count for voting. Nobody will be allowed to vote in the state if their state ID is a student ID. Wow. That is the new law in North Carolina. But here is the other thing that has changed alongside it. When Pat McCrory got elected last year, he was the first Republican governor elected in North Carolina since the 80s. And when he got elected, he appointed a whole new board of elections for the state. He appointed a Republican majority board of elections. That board has now systematically been replacing the local elections boards all around the state with local Republican officials. And so what you see here is the brand new Republican majority local board where Appalachian State is saying, hey, students, hey, you Obama voting students, this new law the Republican governor just signed, it's going to make it way harder for you to vote. But we think it's not hard enough. We're going to make it even tougher. So before now, in that town, in Boone, early voting took place at 2 spots in town and 1 spot on campus. Now the Republicans on the local board are getting rid of on-campus voting altogether. They're combining all three of those polling places into one, and the one that they're picking is not at the school. For regular voting on Election Day, they're also taking 3 precincts and rolling them into one. And that one place is, as you might guess, also not on campus. Altogether, the one polling place the Republicans are assigning now, where there used to be 3, that polling place will be expected to serve more than 9,000 people. 9,300 people at that one polling place, which has 35 parking places. What could possibly go wrong? At the county meeting on Monday, the lone Democrat left on the local board asked whether 9,300 people all being crammed into the same off-campus voting precinct might not just be an awful lot to expect.
Dan, what's the current state guideline for the maximum number of voters in any one precinct?
The last guideline that I recall receiving was probably in 1990.
And what was the maximum number of voters in the guideline?
If I recall correctly, 1,500.
1,500 voters per precinct is the state guideline. But now they're going to make this one for 9,300 people at a site with less than 40 parking places. Also, no more voting at school. And another voting site that they are moving people to in town is nice and far away from where most of the people in town even live. So good luck trying to vote in Boone, North Carolina. Good luck, Appalachian State students. Serves you right for who you tend to vote for and for the fact that you tend to vote. This is an important part of this story that is just now becoming clear. It's not just that the Republicans passed this law to make voting harder everywhere in the state. They've also systematically, top-down, taken over the voting process at the local level. And they're just pulling all the silverware drawers out and dumping everything out all over the floor. And if you think it's bad for Appalachian State, may I introduce you to Elizabeth City State University. Elizabeth City State University is a small, historically black college in the northeastern corner of the state. In Elizabeth City, in their county there, it's the same deal. Republican Governor Pat McCrory stacked the State Board of Elections, which has now stacked the local board. And now with the new law in place and the brand new Republican majority on the local board, the county chairman for the Republican Party, the county chairman, decided he was going to challenge the residency of this guy. His name is Montravius King. Montravius King is a civic-minded guy. He's been registered to vote at the college at Elizabeth City since he got there in 2009. He will be a senior this fall. He has worked on voting drives to get his fellow students to the polls so they vote. He served as president of his university's NAACP chapter. This year, Mr. King decided that he wanted to run for city council. He says he wants to stay in Elizabeth City after he graduates, and he wants to help Elizabeth City see how great it is, what an asset it is to the city to have all those students in town. Well, this week at the county board, the Republican Party chairman stepped in and said no. He formally challenged Mr. King's right to run for office by challenging his residency. Montravius King has lived there and gone to school there and been registered to vote there and has indeed voted there since 2009. But the chairman of the county Republican Party says, as far as he's concerned, you don't live here anymore. And the new Republican Majority Board heard the challenge on Tuesday, and the new Republican Majority Board said, yeah, you know what, kid? You don't live here anymore. You cannot run for city council. We no longer consider you to be a resident. You do not qualify. And since apparently the rules for qualifying to run as a candidate are the same as qualifying to vote, so says the local paper, the Elizabeth City Daily Advance, that means if a student at the local college is being disallowed from running for office, presumably this means they'll disallow him from voting as well. And why stop with just him? I mean, if this works, Republicans could disenfranchise the whole school, right? That's apparently their plan. The Republican Party county chairman tells reporters that he intends to challenge the residency of other students at the local historically black college now, too. He's urging Republicans in college towns across North Carolina to do the same with their new Republican majority boards of elections installed systematically by Republican Governor Pat McCrory. Do this across the state. Let's end students voting across North Carolina. He told the Associated Press, quote, I plan to take this show on the road. North Carolina Republicans clearly think they're going to get away with this. But for the record, it is blatantly illegal blatantly unconstitutional, and it has been since the 1970s, since 1979, when this U.S. Supreme Court ruled that students, in fact, have the constitutional right to register to vote and to vote where they go to school. That case began at another historically black college at Prairie View A&M in Texas, where the county didn't want to let the black students vote there either, and the Supreme Court intervened and said Texas had to let them vote. This is not a subtle gray areas in the law kind of thing. This is as clear as it gets. But the Republicans in North Carolina are doing it anyway, right now, this week. And until somebody stops North Carolina Republicans from what they are doing, it is 1979 all over again. Or I guess 1964 all over again, maybe earlier. The Republican governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, has his approval ratings in the toilet. He's already paying the price for this whiplash, radical turn the state has taken under his Republican leadership. But it is not one man, it's clear now. It is a statewide plan and a statewide effort. And the more you look at what Republicans are doing in North Carolina right now, the more it makes sense why Democrats and African-American voters have been getting arrested by the dozens, by the hundreds, week after week, trying to get the rest of the country to notice the kind of radicalism that is going on there right now.